Hi, everyone. It is 12 o'clock. We're ready to get this started. Thank you so much for joining us. I am very excited to be here. So good afternoon. Officially, for those that don't know, my name is Teresa Cusse. I am the CEO and co-founder of IMPACTIFI, and I am honored to be your moderator for today's discussion on America's AI Action Plan. So most of you are registered because you saw that a few weeks ago, the White House published or released this plan, which lays out a bold roadmap to accelerate AI innovation, build the infrastructure to support it, and strengthen America's position in the global AI race. So what does that mean? How does that impact our businesses, our workforce, and our communities? And that's part of what we're going to be discussing today with this fantastic panel, which, again, very honored to be able to talk to you three about what we're, about the action plan and how it's impacting all of us. So with us, we have John Riley, who is the Chief of Emerging Tech at IMPACTIFI, who has deep experience in emerging tech integration and defense. We have Taniel, CEO of BreakThru Strategies, a seasoned government affairs and public policy strategist, and Marc at Asselin, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, of Swarm Intelligence, an AI technologist and futurist applying AI to real-world challenges from energy to analytics. So again, very excited to have everybody here. And I think we're going to get started with the first question, which is, for those of us that have heard about, or not us, because I've read it, but for those of our attendees who haven't read the plan, but have heard about it or saw it and are joining us today, what, in your own words, what is this action plan and why should everyday Americans care about it? And whoever wants to take the lead and then take an opportunity and also speak about yourself a little bit.
All right, I'll jump in here. So, and when I kind of went through it, I mean, the three core things I got out of it is really, it focuses on like three main pillars, right? Accelerating innovation, building the infrastructure, and really trying to lead international AI diplomacy, also tying in security, right? And I think that foundation right there is giving us this baseline of where to go and why it's important to, I'd say, the average American is it's really setting the landscape, right, of reshaping our economy, but also creating high-paying jobs that are not available in some of these fields, but also in fields that we are being overlooked as well. And it's really it's exciting to see that we're taking this step forward in this way of trying to push the entire country towards adopting AI, but also making it easier for the common person to be a part of it. I'll pass it over to TK or Marc on that one.
Sure. Thank you, John. If I had to summarize what the White House AI Action Plan is at a 30,000-foot view, I would call it a pro-growth, deregulatory, industrial policy for AI with a strong national security spine. And we're going to get into some of that. But it does a couple of things, as John mentioned, the three pillars, but it also undoes the Biden executive order on AI, particularly on innovation and deregulation and permitting. And we're going to get into that and how that will affect folks on the ground in your local communities, what you can expect to see. And I hope to expand on what the short, medium, and long-term benefits are going to be.
So I would just, parrot kind of what they were both saying in the sense that it's around, the acceleration of innovation, building infrastructure and workforce. That one's super exciting to me. I've done a lot of government work. There are a lot of people that are having to be reskilled right now. And I think that this is a huge opportunity for people to follow down that path of getting some level of reskilling with this. And of course, leading with our allies, leading by example, creating standards and, the associated exports and security around these different models.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we're in a great start, and we're going to start diving a little deeper, just like you said. And I want to start off a little bit of the community impact in the workforce, because, there's still, even before the action plan was released, there's been a lot of talk around the workforce piece. So The plan is calling out for training. And again, not just coders, which is what most people are thinking of when they think of AI. They're thinking of programmers and so forth. But it's really tradespeople for the AI infrastructure. So we're talking about electricians, we're talking about HVAC techs, cybersecurity specialists. So how could this reshape workforce opportunities in the next few years? And John, if you want to take the lead, since you are doing a lot in workforce right now, and then the rest of you can chime in, of course, please.
Not a problem. I think this is part of this plan. This is a very impactful part of the plan, right? Because they're addressing the need to help the U.S. scale, and it really is going to be around the infrastructure. And it's also, like you said, it's including people that are not coders, the tradesmen, right? The people that are going to be building data centers, helping with the infrastructure, cybersecurity people that need to also secure the system, and making it easy, but also opening up these doors for these high-paying jobs in those areas. And because like people are always thinking about technology, bringing the tradespeople into this arena is ideal because it's bringing everybody a part of it, right? So it's bringing this inclusion in the workforce, but also opening up this job opportunity for young people that are getting into the workforce and saying, hey, I'm not a technical person. Well, you don't have to be a technical person to be a part of the AI growth, right? You can be in these trades or in these fields, allowing you to expand and support the scaling of this infrastructure that needs to be put in place. So these young kids that are in schools, right, K through 12 training, of understanding, hey, I'm not technical, but you know what? I can still be a part of AI in this fashion, right? So you're seeing this shift where everybody wants to be in technology, but some people say, hey, you know what? I want to be in the trades. Both of them are going to be equally important in this plan and addressing that, but making it open these opportunities that normally weren't there. But now it's supporting it, right? It's the national initiative to identify and train high priority roles. That's something that's important that's really being pushed by the government down, right? So now states can be supported in the upskilling of these new roles and jobs out there, and also make it available to these other communities that don't think they have access to it.
That's fair.
Sure, and I would expand on that and say a couple of things. Getting into, before you can have these data centers, you have to build them, right? You need the infrastructure, you need an upgraded electrical grid to transfer the enormous amount of energy that these centers are going to take. And it's not just one center that this plan envisions us building out. It's several all across the United States. So you're talking about upgrading our electrical grid, building these data centers, interconnectivity, making sure that energy transmission is in line with the needs of our communities. And for those folks who are in more rural areas, you're going to see a lot more work trucks in your area, upgrading your transmission lines, upgrading your energy grids. And so I think that's going to be the most short-term and most quickly visible aspect of this. And then, before that happens, though, there's going to be permitting reform. And so in order to get to the point where the applications and the permits to build these centers begin, there needs to be reform on the policy side. And I'm happy to go into that if you'd like, but that's not something you're going to see in your neighborhood. That's something you're going to hear and see coming out of Washington first. And then you're going to see the work getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd like to hear a little bit about, like you were saying, the policy and how that's, because, right, we see, we're talking about what we're going to see in the community, but some action items need to happen before we start seeing that activity. So what is it that needs to happen from the top down?
Would you like me to jump on that, or Marc, do you want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about that? Sure.
Sorry, and then I definitely want Marc's input on from the tech industry side and what he's seeing as well, but I wanted to kind of dovetail from what you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we're going to see is, and we saw with this first action plan, is the rollback of the 2023 executive order, specifically focusing on deregulation and a free speech centric rewrite of NIST guidance and federal procurement. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, housed under the Department of Commerce, has a framework in place on AI, and that's going to be redone. And redone in the sense that it's going to be what the White House says is more objective analysis as far as our LLMs are concerned. So removing instances of DEI, removing climate change, and focusing more objectively. The second part of that is permitting reform, and that comes in two primary areas. The National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, will be revisited so that data centers are excluded and not part of the NEPA requirements, which are very stringent, takes a lot of time. You've heard probably permitting reform in some sense coming out of Washington as being a focus of Congress, and you're going to see that accelerate with this exclusion. You're going to see nationwide 404 permitting, as well as a Fast 41 expansion. And so FAST comes out of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act from 2015, which created a permitting council. So that council is now going to help fast track this reform. And the other part of that, it has to do with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, all potential regulatory barriers to building our data centers. That has to do with the materials being discharged in American waters whenever something is built. There's going to be pushback on these permitting reforms. You can expect that, and many advocacy groups have already come out publicly with letters, basically saying that they will sue the U.S. government for environmental protection standards, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and the like. But this is going to be the first step, is getting the policy and the permitting reform done and in place so that we can then go out and build these things.
Thanks. Marc, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off when you were going to speak earlier, but we'll pass it to you.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot else to say other than what Taniel said from the policy perspective. I guess from the technology perspective, a lot of the types of barriers that you run into kind of flow into the idea that, we want that, this policy is going to allow for more things like open models and being able to allow for more innovation. Like right now, a lot of the big players obviously are closed models. We're feeding our data into those models. It's, there are a lot of use cases where it's a challenge to be able to grow a business outside of having access to your own models. And it encourages more and more open source models, open weight models, which allow us to be able to see the parameters associated to those models and be able to tweak them for our own use cases and create other things.
So, keeping on the community impact part of it, what are like some of the things that are needed to make sure that, communities that are not in major tech hubs, how can we make sure that they're benefiting too, right? So you're more rural areas or you're less known as a tech hub areas in these communities. What needs to be in play for them to be able to benefit from these items as well?
I mean, from my perspective, I would look at it as, I think that, there definitely needs to be a level of education that is, I don't want to call it standard, but, people need to think differently when it comes to artificial intelligence. Universities are starting to move farther, towards that, but unfortunately, there's still a lot of the original notion of how people are taught. Again, I'm a technical guy. I've been doing it for 35 years, but when it comes to college and how things are right now, there still is very much, they haven't caught up, right? So, people are using ChatGPT. It's not the same thing. There's a lot of different aspects of it. It's kind of a fundamental change of how people need to think and around how they run businesses and how they do different types of things within the world. And I think that schools and universities, even in rural communities, absolutely need to be able to shift their thinking to be able to allow for people to be able to compete in the future markets.
No, and I'll pick it back off that, Mark. I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's really the educational part, right? And some of it's basic education. And the challenge is, like Mark was saying with university and schools, is curricula can't keep up with the pace of AI, right? They can't move that curriculum fast enough. This is why now you're starting to see employers look at people with AI certifications in these fields because they're more accurate or more up to date than what somebody's coming out of school with. So it's a different mindset that's happening even from a workforce standpoint of, do I take somebody with an associate's or a master's degree, or I take this guy's been in certifications in AI the past year and it's up to date and I know he can start day one. Now, we never used to think like that. And that's just our culture here is you go to school, you get hired right away. Now, because of emerging technology and it moves so fast that somebody that's been in the weeds for 2 years with certifications is sometimes more qualified than somebody that's come out of school. But these communities need to be aware of, you have opportunities still, even in these underserved communities or communities that normally aren't into technology, is if you have the basic education, you have a chance to be a part of this growing infrastructure around AI. And I think that's just more of an awareness thing of bringing it to the forefront, and usually has to be led from the top down for that to happen.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that really quick, Terry. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Please.
In addition to the coders and the AI jobs, you need AI infrastructure jobs. So you actually see mentioned in the president's AI action plan, the acceleration of apprenticeships or expansion of apprenticeships and CTE education. And you also see a national initiative to identify, which is usually the first thing, is identify those critical occupations, the electricians, the advanced HVAC, other technically skilled careers. And when CISA, our cybersecurity infrastructure security agency, first got involved on the AI, they had to first identify those critical infrastructure. Well, what is a critical infrastructure? Once we've identified that, then we can put a plan in place. And so what this executive order also does is identifies those AI specific or AI centric critical infrastructure occupations. Once, and this order says to go out and do that. And once those are identified, the next step is to then start the upskilling, start the training, start the expansion and the funding that goes with that. And I will say to at least identify those folks who are critical of the current administration, and the budget cuts and the staff layoffs at various agencies, you're going to start to see funding come back to those areas that the administration identifies as necessary. And then we've heard some critics talk about, well, we've had a brain drain at NIST. Well, their funding is going to come back to NIST, and it'll probably be even more than it had been under the previous administration in order to carry out this executive order.
Sure. Yeah, and I was just going to bring up apprentices, so I'm glad that you did, because I think this is an opportunity for that. And I think this is also the opportunity for that public-private partnership, right? So we're talking about the education and the public systems. They're a little bit slower, whether it's the K through 12 or public education, institutions of higher education. There's a lot of red tape that has to go in order to approve the change in curriculum and the change of the way we teach. So I think this is where that private sector and the training providers and the industry as a whole, whether it's the infrastructure or the tech, right, or the combination, can come into play and help kind of shape what that education piece comes to. So those are just I feel like that this is a huge opportunity for that, and I'm just calling them all out so they can jump up to the plate.
Sure. And, the universities that are kind of already doing that, whether it's FIU, which is a leader, Florida International University in South Florida, that is a partner with NIST on the education side for cybersecurity. You're going to see that those types of universities, University of South Florida in Tampa that houses Florida Digital Service, you're going to see an increase in funding and programming and the P3 or public-private partnership that Terry mentioned. So you're going to see an expansion of that across the board, not just Florida. I'm using the Florida as examples because that's where we are, but you're going to see that across all of the United States.
Love that. So speaking of some of the barriers and so forth, the plan emphasizes removing some of these barriers and regulatory barriers to speed innovation. Where's the balance between moving fast and ensuring that AI is safe and responsible at the same time? And I don't know, whoever
You want
wants
to
to
handle that
take
one?
it.
Because I know one, just from your background, you've been in AI for a long time, but also worked with some of these national agencies where, you know, the guardrails, I think, Terry, you're talking about, right? Where are the guardrails when it comes to AI?
Sure. So, you know, I guess I would say, you know, for context, I've worked with a number of different federal agencies and in different technical capacities. And I will say that to their credit, they are, call it good or bad. You know, I look at it as careful, you know, as it relates to how they're doing things. I'm usually the guy that's trying to ram technology down their throat, and they're saying no, 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 and they're kind of, you know, they really want to, you know, I want to show them all the shiny objects, and they're really interested in, you know, following procedure as they should, and you need that kind of yin and yang as it relates to this. So I guess that sorry, I'm hearing some kind of background sound. I guess I apologize, I lost my train of thought, but refresh the question in my brain went like it's all good. It says I haven't had a coffee yet, so remind me please.
Yeah,
I
so
lost my train of thought there.
those guardrails, right? The guardrails that are being put in place by different government agencies for AI, of not letting it get out of hand, or, you know, or bad actors getting a hold of it, or how do we control how fast it moves, right? Without
yeah, absolutely.
getting,
I mean,
yeah,
it goes back to what Taniel was saying, was you know, a lot of the, you know, NIST controls and other guardrails, you know, around coming up with, at least for me at the federal level, of how we would, you know, provide controls and constraints around these types of things, and start to feed that down, you know, in conjunction with a lot of the labs. I've done a lot of work with DOE, and the national labs are actually really great at providing some of the infrastructure and guidance that relates to the, you know, how to bring these types of technologies to market in a safe way. If it's gone through those processes, then the likelihood is that it'll come into the private industry in a way that is safe for, you know, our communities and whatnot, as well as, you know, controlling it and having certain guardrails around, you know, many of the models and certain technologies. You know, if you don't have those guardrails, you know, I was seeing even today, they were mentioning about GPT-5 and how somebody was like, almost, I think it came out, what, 2 days ago, and somebody was able to jailbreak it and make it do all kinds of things that it's not supposed to do, even with all its new guardrails. So it's certainly not, in my mind, something that's ready for prime time for, you know, using in a, I guess, in a government use case, much less, you know, any kind of anything outside of like a consumer app. So I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done, and I think that that's a lot of what this plan lays out for us.
Yeah, and you're going to see a couple of things. I'll just piggyback up on what Marc said. You're going to see a push for secure by design, which will help in that regard. Of course, there will always be bad actors. There will always be ways around U.S. laws, and people are going to exploit that. Bad actors, North Korea, China, Russia, are going to do that. But secure by design is one aspect. Chip location verification is going to be another area. And then, of course, you know, the third pillar that John talked about, you know, that the AI action plan discusses, is American leadership in the international AI diplomacy and security. This is that national security spine I was talking about. So export controls are going to play a big part of that, getting U.S. and Western allies to adopt those same standards, and NIST-led initiatives are going to be the core of the internationalization of American AI infrastructure development.
Interesting. And John, were you going to say anything before I?
No.
Okay. So again, now, and a little going back a little bit to what Marc was talking about. So some of these open source and open weight AI, right? So the plan again is supporting some of this work. And what does that mean for our non-technical audience when we're talking about the open source and the open weight AI, and why is it mentioned in the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, I mean, a big challenge that we have right now when we see Anthropic, when we see OpenAI and a lot of these other companies that, you know, have hundreds of billions of dollars and all this capability, it's great for them, and it's great for, you know, simple tools for us to use. The bigger challenge that you have, though, is that they are what's called black box. They are closed. So those models, outside of the few that OpenAI just came out with a couple open source models, the idea is that using open source software and open weight models allows for more innovation, a lot more small business, a lot more creativity for companies and organizations to be able to create more of those types of things. To be able to create and compete, to be honest with you. So open weight model is exactly that. When you have a model that is trained on something, the weights, like for the ChatGPTs of the world, the weights for the models themselves are very closely guarded. Open source models have open weights that allow for you to inspect, for the people that are trying to use them, to inspect them such that you can make changes to them and use them for different use cases. And what I mean by the weights is that if you've got a model that's trained on, I don't know, something more specific, right? I think that one of the you know, right now the larger models have them, and they call them foundation models because they try to be everything to everyone. But a lot of the open source models, if you start to see, you've got models that are specific to medical and specific to other use cases and different things, and they get trained really, really well on something very specific. So they can do certain things very well. A lot of that is by controlling the weights of the parameters and the information that's fed into it. Unfortunately, many of those models are closed source because the companies that have put them together, the information is not publicly available. But there are plenty of models now from universities and other organizations that have started to put a number of open source models. If you look out on Hugging Face and other areas, you'll start to see hundreds of thousands of open source models that you can freely download and start to play with and interact with and use for your own use cases.
Interesting. Okay, so I like the way you explained it because it does make a little more sense for those of us that are not as technical. So I appreciate that. So does that open us for, you would say, for more innovation, or is there more risk? Because we're talking about the risk, right? And then, like you just said, ChatGPT, you know, was out for the version 5 was out for 2 days ago and already got jacked. So like, how does that impact us then?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it goes back to the training, right? On you know, having certain types of guardrails and being able to use the if you're going to use open source, the reality is that by itself has some level of risk, right? Open source inherently, if I'm looking at a code base and I bring it down, and you're looking at the same code base and you look at and you bring it down, but you want to look at it in a nefarious way, you'll be able to see very quickly the potential problems within, you know, the vulnerabilities in the code that I myself am using as well. AI models are no different, but at the same time, as you start to create something that's, you know, much more specific, and then you start to put these guardrails around, then you have an ability to start to provide value in smaller models instead of these larger foundational models. I think the other thing is that's important with the smaller models is that the idea of that you can spur certain types of innovation. I run small models on my laptop, whereas in the larger use cases, you're either using, you know, the larger closed source, you know, foundation models, or you're having to run in some kind of cloud environment that costs a lot of money, you know, per hour, in fact, to be able to run these larger models. So I think it increases innovation, but it increases accessibility into those models to be able to do certain types of things, to be able to innovate and build new products.
True. So TK, how does this then impact on the export controls, international policy? Because again, some of these open source and open weights are internationally originated.
That's a great question, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to see how it develops on the international level. So first, you're going to see a U.S.-led quote AI alliance that's going to focus on exports and standards with a focus and emphasis on institutionalizing American tech dominance. Which is something that is going to have to be accepted by the world. And I think understand that American leadership and other countries are leading, the world is less safe. And that extends to technology policy and specifically AI. Whoever wins the AI race of the century is going to win the century. We get there. So in addition to the secure by design, you need to have partners who are willing to adopt these standards, who are willing to align their country's laws and export controls with the United States. That's going to be a multilateral effort by both the Department of Commerce and the Department of State, which does have an Office of Technology. And that is going to be something that we continue to build out in the years ahead. But it will take voluntary, acceptance by the international community, particularly Western democracies, who want to be in that driver's seat along with the U.S. You're also going to have information sharing and analysis centers. So ISACs is what we call them, specifically on AI. And that's also going to help with the guardrails. As we've seen, you can kind of look at what the United States has done with cybersecurity as a framework and apply that to AI. And you're going to kind of see a little bit of repetition in that sense, but there will be differences and tweaks and some changes, things that we've learned from our cybersecurity frameworks that we're going to apply to American infrastructure. But that's also going to, that information sharing and analysis, not only between agencies, but then between agencies and of different countries. For instance, the UK, we work very, very closely with the United Kingdom and their AI policy, and even on some cybersecurity related laws that they have passed and are ahead of us in Congress. We're starting to see Congress try to do and pass as well when it comes to like children's online safety and things like that. And so you're going to see that partnership and that collaboration. But in addition to the export controls, in addition to secured by design, in addition to those AI, the next thing is going to be information sharing and threat analysis. And that is going to help harden, if you will, those export controls and making sure, we can minimize threats.
Interesting. Okay. That actually segues very much because my next question was going to be about the opportunities, excuse me, with the global collaboration. And, because again, right now we're kind of seeing it as the race of AI leadership at the global scale, right? So, but at the same time, we need that collaboration because, like you just said, right? So, where are we seeing some of these opportunities, even though we're at the same time competing? And that again, whoever can answer that, but I'm leading it to you because you were talking just now about like our partnership with UK, who is a great partner. But what other opportunities are we seeing, or are we?
Yeah, those are in the process of being developed right now. I think those foundations that we mentioned are going to lay the groundwork, and we're going to continue to build upon that. But that's the first step, is laying that foundation of those that alliances, the standards, universal adoption of standards, export controls, and then the information and threat analysis sharing. From there, you're going to have probably some discussions and debates in the public space around privacy. about information quality. I think that's something that Marc talked about is, the right response from AI. And we're going to kind of see how the quote unquote objective AI, as opposed to what the White House Action Plan labels as misinformation, DEI, and climate change, how that, what the output is once you frame it in that way or program the AI in that way. And so, cautiously optimistic, but I think one thing that we have going for us is the bipartisanship approach in Congress when it comes to dealing with China. And so this is, the AI action plan is China focused. You can tell that's in the minds of the authors. And you're going to have bipartisan support, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, who understand that threat. But Congress has a role to play here, and they're going to want to exercise their authority in setting that policy closely with this administration. And one of the other things that could happen is what happens when the administration changes. And that's one of the things that we have to always look at too from a policy perspective. Whereas historically the presidency has been the presidential administrations have been extensions of previous administrations. We're kind of seeing this new normal where the pendulum shifts a little bit more. It's not necessarily a layer added on top of each other. But I think that if you even look at the White House executive orders under the Trump administration, which actually launched the first executive orders on AI, the Biden administration expanded upon that. They didn't undo too much of it, and so I think you're going to see that. But I'm cautiously optimistic about Congress being involved in this.
I was going to ask something. I just lost it right now. Cool. Fine. I'll move on to the next thing. So now I want to shift back now to a little bit to industry, right? So, we talked about AI infrastructure, the tech side of AI as well. But industry as a whole, which industries are we seeing are benefiting from the acceleration goals of this plan? Or what are we seeing from an industries that are going to be struggling a little bit to adapt to this? And what are some insights there? And I don't know, Marc, John.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I for me, and I could just speak from experience, I don't want to say everybody wants to use AI, but everybody wants to use AI. So in terms of industry, beyond government, there, at the end of the day, AI is focused on the use of data, right? So it helps from the standpoint of as we're awash in lots and lots and lots of data, the idea is that AI has this capacity to help organize the information and derive different types of insights. So industries that I've seen that have really benefit from that have been like port security, different things around certain health related industries that are not related to patient health information or HIPAA compliance necessarily, high level consulting or triage type of applications, different types of things like that. It's a matter of taking stuff that we have a ton of lots and lots of data, and the creation of processes and automations around things that that are tedious, that allow us to be able to do more important work, like I say, like doctors and nurses and different groups like that. So I see there's a lot of opportunity in these. I think the more heavily regulated non-government agencies, I'll be curious to see how organizations that fall under things like HIPAA, how you're still going to have those guardrails, right? As relates to HIPAA and certain types of data restrictions. So it'll be interesting to see how these products will evolve and how AI will evolve around certain industries that way. I think that roundabout way of saying, I think that government is very interested in moving forward. I think that there's going to be a lot of as Taniel said, for universal guardrails that is part of this policy that we're putting in. I think the smaller industries, perhaps a lot less less heavily regulated. I mean, they're already using this stuff now. Everybody's using it for automation and just about everything, as we've all seen. So lots of opportunity there.
And I'll jump on that as well. I think industry-wide, I think the financial sector has been really honing on leveraging AI. Like Marc was saying, they have tons and amounts of data for analysis. AI comes into a huge play, right? Along with the automation that's around. You look at banks like JP Morgan, you look at Fidelity Investments, you look at Bank of America. These are ones that have all been early adopters of emerging tech, right? They were also adopters of blockchain when it came out, right? So they look at this emerging tech and saying, how can we be more efficient, get more insight? AI is providing more insight and accuracy than they can normally get from a normal employee when it comes to looking at documents in numbers, right, and crunching numbers. So they've really been honing in and embracing it and setting their own standards and guardrails in there at the same time, right? But I think as we move forward and kind of this policy is looking at doing is how do we start making these standards nationwide or global, right? And I think that's a lot of collaboration also with other countries because that banking industry is huge and there's a lot of guardrails or standards that now need to be on a global level, not just on a US level. So we're in this era of this new emerging tech that's moving faster than anything we've ever seen. And now we're trying to play catch up of what should be the standards around it, who's going to decide those standards, who do we have to collaborate for those standards, right? These are all things that are going to be coming over the next 5 to 10 years as tech gets faster and faster and faster. And I think this plan that's being put in place is kind of helping. How do we start defining those standards, right, for these industries so they can leverage this technology and use it the right way? And we're in just a new era of how do we put our hands and keep our hands on it, knowing it's moving faster than anything's happened. I mean, Marc, you can jump in here as well. I mean, the past 2 years, it's moved like lightning speed, right? 6 months ago, a year ago, right? A year ago, 2 years ago, ChatGPT came out. People were talking about AI agents. They don't want to talk about agents anymore. They want to talk about agentic agents. They've already moved past an AI agent, right? So the common person who has no idea what that is, it's overwhelming. And we're in this space, a lot of us every day, and we hear the updates and it's hard to keep up with it. So you can imagine, how do you keep up with a standard or regulations around something that's changing so fast?
So I'm going to segue really quickly because you just said something. Do you feel, TK, you alluded earlier how this is kind of taking what we did with cybersecurity and creating the NIST framework that a lot of other countries also follow. And the intent is that maybe with this AI framework that we are creating, that others will follow and it becomes the standard. Do you think it's also setting kind of the precedents for we're talking a lot in Impactify with quantum, and there's a lot of quantum that's coming. That's the next wave. People are still trying to catch up with AI, but quantum's basically here. We already have some post-quantum readiness talk conversation. So would we say that these action plans that we're seeing now is setting up that path so we can be more ready for these other technologies as they come along?
I think you're absolutely right. And I would say that you can expect to see, I would think with this administration, but if not, definitely the next one, another executive order that merges or marries AI with quantum. I mean, you saw cybersecurity, now you see AI marrying with cybersecurity, and the next step is quantum. That is going to be the logical next step in aligning all of these three major industries and how they shape not just governments, but businesses and people. And so I would expect that a follow-up executive order, once some of these things start being implemented, starts examining the impact, if I will, of quantum on our AI policy. Little plug there for Impactify. On the short term with this plan, data center siting will accelerate. We talked about the permitting. You're also going to have defense pilots, DoD adoption will kick in. And typically DoD does take the lead on policy. So the military adopts a policy first and then other agencies tend to follow. From the medium term, over the next 1 to 3 years, grid and workforce build out, compliance models, as well as procurement with vendors, and then tightening of certain export controls. And then the long term, the 3 to 7 year plan will be industrial capacity, chips development, model development, regulatory path and dependence is what we call it on the government side, and then the geopolitical aspect. And so that's what we can expect to see in the short, medium, and long term.
Perfect. I appreciate that. So, we talked about all the good stuff that this plan is, setting forth. What are some of the challenges? Because it's an ambitious plan, right, that we're talking about. So, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that could potentially slow it down or derail it, whether it's technical, economical, political? Like, do we have any?
I think it's missing. I mean, it's missing a few things in some of those areas you brought up, Terry. Right? I mean, you look from an education standpoint, right? There's no really standard teaching, training, or support programs for AI education. So there's no standard on that across the board. And you look at other countries like India, Kuwait, Portugal, Qatar, Republic of South Korea. The UAE has now put a standard in place for kids that are 4 years old to start getting AI education. Right? That's a standard by the country being pushed down. So there's no standard really attached to this yet. I'm not saying there won't be, but that's the kind of thing that needs to happen for that education to be adopted from K through 12 is that standard industry. And then some parts of it of the funding, right? The timelines, milestones, the budgetary details, the cost estimates for the programs. Those things, sometimes they come afterwards. And like TK is saying, some of these budgets are going to come back in and get larger and larger. But those are some of the things that are just missing in the detail of it right now. And really that ethical kind of AI framework, like, I know I've learned this from Marc over the years, like AI for good, right? How do you implement AI for good in that mindset of this is AI to be used for good, right? We're talking about cybersecurity. There's always threat actors out there, but the mentality, if it's been a standard from the get-go of we're using AI for good in all areas, here's why, and kind of making that process that really wasn't pushed that hard in this policy. I'm sure it'll probably grow over time, but those are some of the things that jumped out at me that were missing. I don't know about Marc and Taniel, TK.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more a matter of saying, I think it's hard to write a policy to something that is a moving target as well, right? Because AI, we talk about it, we look at, for those of us that follow on this, I feel like I always tell people half my job is I spend my time reading and learning constantly. And a lot of that is because technology is constantly changing. When AI comes out or somebody comes out with some new model, some new company, everyone keeps coming up and one-upping each other with something new. And to me, by the time, if we're looking at, 2 to 3 years out kind of thing, everything that we're doing right now is going to be completely irrelevant and old school. I hate to say that, but from the standpoint of these types of technologies, the evolution of technologies because of AI and AI in and of itself continues to increase in its capacity to reason, it's increase in its capacity to have additional memory. It's really difficult to put guardrails around something that progressively continues to get more and more intelligent. And whether or not we agree AGI is something, artificial general intelligence that's supposed to be, smarter than us and, beyond our capacity. I don't exactly know when that's going to happen. Some people will tell you that we already have that, but how do you write policies for something like that, right? How do you write policies for something that, theoretically is more intelligent than we are? So I think that there are aspects of this that I see, as Taniel said, I think that there's probably going to be additional policies written in, or at least updates to what we have. I think it's a great start, though.
Yeah, and then going back to your original question, Terry, what are the challenges and the risks? I think economics are one. Global recessions, supply chain disruptions could impact negatively and be a risk, something that businesses are going to take into account first and foremost. The other challenges are political in nature. We talked about changing administrations, changing Congress. And then the last thing is outbreaks of wars. And sometimes that is could be informational, as we saw in the Russia-Ukraine war. The first time around, years ago, Russia launched a bunch of cyber attacks on Ukrainian energy and infrastructure capacity. The second time they did it, Ukraine was ready and was able to deter a lot of those malicious cyber attacks that were previously successful for the Russian Federation. And so you're going to see a lot of testing, if you will, in real-time combat theaters potentially happening across the globe. And so those are some of the challenges and risks that I see as potential disruptors to American dominance and leadership in AI.
Interesting. So we're getting close to time. So I'm looking ahead, let's fast forward 3 to 5 years. What are some ways that we know that this plan was successful? How do we measure the success of this? Is it jobs? Is it global ranking? I mean, I think that's part of what we're trying to do with this plan, right? Is be the leaders. But what are your thoughts on that? And it could be any I'm asking all three of you your opinions.
I'll jump in. Marc kind of brought up as well, because it moves so fast, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Right? I think we have the foundation with AI and when the advancements of it, that it's going to be a moving target and always adjusting. This won't be something like in the before in the days where you can put a policy in place and standards and it's a tweak. This will almost need to be tweaked as fast as emerging tech is moving and AI is moving. So it could be an update every 6 months to this policy based on the new advancements that are going on. So we have a foundation now with this policy, but knowing that some of it could go out the door sideways because some new technology came aboard. I'm like, we can't even address this because now we have to address this. So 3 to 5 years is a stretch. I'd say I'd like to see how successful it is within the next year or maybe year and a half.
Fair.
Just because what's going on and how fast it's moving. And also it's preparing us in our mindset as the American people of it's going to change. So what you're seeing today, it could probably change in 12 months, which is rare, but this is kind of the world we're living in now, is be prepared for it to update and change, and also new ideas and new insights that come aboard and people coming, hey, this is how we should be addressing it. And here's why. This public-private partnership is going to be huge now, right? Because you have the experts that are out there and then helping the government figure out how to navigate it. So I think it's huge, but I think next year and a half is going to be interesting, but I think this is a great start to have us thinking about it.
I would just add that I think of all of this, I think the part that has me the most excited to be able to see if this is successful is around, augmented education for young people, but also, people that are in the active workforce, people that are in government, people that are there's so much opportunity coming because of these technologies. A lot of people are so worried about losing jobs to AI and all these different things. It's kind of like, I hate to go back to the, people were worried that they weren't going to be able to have horse and buggy carriages because cars were invented. This is kind of that same type of evolution where this is the next thing that's coming. I think that people will be perhaps, either more afraid or less afraid. I would hope less afraid. As they become more educated, as there's more opportunities that come to them by the different technologies. And, it's so interesting to see how many people, I'm big on entrepreneurship, and it's so interesting to see how many people are now coming into the world and starting successful businesses. AI has leveled a playing field because software development, to a degree, and I'm a software guy, software has become commoditized, and I think that more and more business, a level of success, a measurement of success will be to see how many more businesses, small businesses that have expanded and gotten success, that have come out and been successful with new and interesting ideas. How many new medical breakthroughs will we have had over the next couple of years, type thing. So there's just so many different positives that I could see from that standpoint.
I'm going to point to something that's, I guess, a little more tangible. What a measure of success in implementing this AI action plan for me will be if within the next 15 months, we have a Republican-controlled House, Senate, and White House. if that permitting reform can be done at the policy level. If you see that legislation pass in the next 15 months, that in and of itself, to me, is the first check box in implementing this plan, and that will be a success. The next step will then be, I think, what Marc and John talked about, the funding and the upskilling and reskilling of American workforce, from current employees to middle career, early entry, and then the education, our youth, and how they're educating and learning and building careers for the future, which we need. We know there's a cybersecurity talent gap. We've known that for a long time. You can go to the Department of Commerce Heat Seek and see that the number of cybersecurity job openings continues to be greater than the number of positions filled. And so we do need to accelerate that. And that was one of the things that I worked at when I was at Offensive Security, was that labor pipeline. But so the more immediate, measure of success will be, can Congress, implement legislative change and policies on the permitting side. And so once you see that, I think you have a runway, if you will, to start to go down on the implementation, and then the construction and contracts will be, and the funding that comes with it will be the next box to check. And so that's what I'm looking at in the more immediate future. I imagine that this administration is serious about this action plan and implementing it. And so the next 15 months will focus on, you have budget talks coming up for FY26 that's going to resume in Congress when they come back from the August recess in September. They only have, less than 20 legislative days to do it in. You're probably going to have a short-term CR, and then you're going to have a long-term budget that will take into account the permitting reform that I mentioned. And so it's up to Congress and the administration to do that first.
I like it. So we have 2 minutes. This is lightning round. As quick as possible, what is the one takeaway you want our audience to remember about the action plan, the AI action plan?
And call it build fast, but with guardrails.
I like it. Nice and short and sweet. Anybody else?
I don't know. Like Marc said, I think hold on tight. It's going to be a very crazy ride as you start to learn more about how AI is going to impact our future collectively, not just individually, but the whole country.
Yeah, I'm looking at the standards, Congress implementing the permitting reform, and then the federal agencies' rules on coming out of NIST and the information sharing. I think those are going to be really important takeaways, because that is the foundation for this. We're not going to get there without the policy reforms. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing those policy reform happen in the next 15 months.
Love it. Guys, this has been amazing. I think we've just started to peel the onion. I feel like we could talk for another hour and dive even deeper. So we may have to do an encore. I'm just saying, in a few months, just to see where we all are and do another update. But thank you so much for taking the time. To our attendees, thank you as well. We will have a recording of this later in our YouTube. So if you missed a part of it, or if you want to share it with friends, make sure that you let them know. But I thank you for joining us, and thank you to all three of you. You were fantastic. I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.